Hello and welcome back to Refractions. I am Stephen Mallon, your host, and I am very excited that we are joined by Kimberly Landa, who is the president of Kinzelman Art Consulting. So, Kimberly, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, one second. Sorry, I was hearing a ghost. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, if you can just tell us a little bit about your history with photography, that'd be awesome.
I was reflecting on this a little bit, and I remember that my first job ever was actually to be an assistant for a local photographer in Houston. So I kind of forgot about that just in my history because it feels so far away because it was in high school. But I think that was really my real introduction into photography. Her name was Margaret Rotan. She's fantastic. I was her editing assistant, went with her on shoots, saved up to buy my own first digital camera, which I think was like a Nikon D80, if I remember the model correctly. And I loved that camera. And then I took photography in high school and became the photographer for the school newspaper. And that was sort of where I really started to appreciate that feeling of like being really in the action, but behind the barrier of your camera. And I totally fell in love with that. And also being able to capture these really cool moments of like sporting events and, everything that you do when you're on the staff of a high school newspaper. And I think that's where my love for photography was really born. In undergrad, I went to UT and I studied studio art and business. And one of my focuses was film photography. So that was like really falling in love with the dark room and really learning how to work a camera that's fully manual, which was super challenging. And now I don't really produce work, sadly, very much anymore. I still do photography a lot, but it's a lot more of a hobby. I like very much appreciate film photography as something that gives me kind of like a slowdown in such a busy world that we live in, but I don't do it professionally. But I did find my way to art consulting, which is what I do professionally. And it sort of flipped my perspective to being the viewer instead of the photographer. The viewer really for all art, but also photography, which has been a super lucky, enriching, and fun career. I think you're on mute, Stephen.
I found my ghost, so I just got to mute the speakers behind me. One second.
No worries.
My other computer was playing the interview, but at like a 5 second
No,
delay. So it was hearing us, but like slightly disconnected from what we were saying. So,
horribly
uh,
disorienting.
so yeah, as a consultant, how would you describe your job? Like what's the elevator pitch? If somebody doesn't know what you do, like how would you describe it?
So it's a little bit challenging to give an elevator pitch because our job, we're very responsive to our clientele and our clientele is very diverse. So I'll do my best to give you my elevator pitch.
Long elevator, the
Long
big
elevator
Empire State Building
pitch.
elevator.
Perfect. I mean, the most simplified way to put it is that we're the middleman between the collector and the art, whether that's through by way of dealers, galleries, auction houses. We're facilitating the art acquisitions and working with our clients to build art collections or commission site-specific artworks in public or private spaces. So, we essentially manage art collections. So that starts with the building of the art collection, and that can be with a corporate or private collection. And then I think what a lot of people miss is it doesn't really stop with just the art viewing and purchasing. We then work with our clients on all the logistics. So that's, shipping, framing, installation, into the future, conservation. Sometimes we do art rotations, museum loans for certain collectors. It's really very diverse and broad and expansive. And really for our larger collectors, corporate and private, we really function almost like a concierge for them. So we're always on call, which you wouldn't believe there actually are art emergencies that do come up. So we're there to just sort of guide them through the art collecting process and then manage their collection into the future. And sometimes even de-accessing parts of their collection if they want to sell a piece or divest a large portion of their collection. But I would say the core of our job is helping people navigate the art market and build meaningful collections.
I think we all need that help. Um, so like what's a typical kind of like week for you? I know like on a day-to-day it may not happen, but like on the span of a week or a month, like what are some, what are some examples of some requests you might get from your clients?
That's a good question. I mean, it is so different every day. And it's like, I feel like because of the nature of our job and the fact that we're a very small team, I can also have like a perfect to-do list scheduled out for my day. And then it just often goes out the window. But I'll give you an example of a really fun day and a more monotonous day. So
Please
Friday,
do.
I got to go to the IFPDA print fair in New York and take a client and walk them around and buy art. So that is, the best day you can possibly have. It's super fun and productive. And I got to go to the preview the night before and sort of scope it out for them, see what they might like, make introductions to dealers that I don't know that I think might have works they might be interested in so that I can really make sure I'm understanding what the work's about, why it might appeal to them. I mean, that's definitely the best part of the job. And, going to art fairs and art openings and on the phone with gallerists and all of that. And then the other end of the spectrum is being absolutely locked to my laptop, emailing, scheduling shipments, and getting framing quotes and managing budgets for corporate projects and making sure that we're staying within the parameters. A lot of emailing, unfortunately, which is just, I think, the age that we live in, where no matter what you're doing, you're kind of tied to your email. In terms of client requests, I mean, we'll get a lot of appraisal inquiries in very often. I'm not an appraiser, but we have appraisers on our team. Um, it's, it's a lot of large projects where we're coming in, meeting with the architects, meeting with the designers and the client, and then all kind of collaborating to come up with art collection visions and goals and what parameters we want to be within. And then just taking all the necessary steps to build the collection. So I don't really know if that answers your question because it's so different every day. But that's
No,
like
it does. And I mean, I think like, my photographic, curiosity is kind of like, when did those requests come in that involve buying photo prints? Like, does a hotel ever call you saying, we are building a new space in Chicago and we need, you know, it's right by the water and we need 200 prints of the Chicago skyline from, the, early 20th century to the, present. Like, would that be kind of something that they would ask or?
Yeah, I think that would probably fall a little bit more toward hospitality than the types of projects that we typically get put across our desk. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because I feel like for most of our clients, they'll come to us and say, hey, we're building a new headquarters in Dallas and we really want it to emphasize nature or people, human connection, whatever it is that feels like it will resonate with them and their company. And this is for our corporate clients. We'll usually come back to them and they might say, we want prints or we want paintings. And we'll always come back and say, you should really diversify the media. So we're hoping that they dip into photography. We're hoping that they dip into prints. We're also hoping that they dip into maybe sculpture and installation work and paintings. But yes, that is the type of inquiry that we'll get where it's like, this is our building or our company or our home. And this is sort of our overarching goal and interest in art. And here's our budget, or we have no idea how to even conceptualize a budget. And we'll work with them to sort of narrow down what it is that they're looking for and where we'll come into play in the project.
So it's funny that yeah, there's the possibility that just like any, you know, commercial client where they're like, we don't know how much we have money, even though they know how much money they have, they don't know how much money they want to put in towards buying the art. And then like, well, how much square footage are you talking about? And it's like, you know, it's we think it's this. And like, all right, well, if you think it's that, do you think you want to spend, you know, 100, 200, 500, like, you know, and just see where the, you know, like when do they go, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's a really tough part of navigating projects like this, where it's like we never know their threshold and their starting point of what they think is an investment. And we get everything. I mean, we'll get clients saying the low end of the spectrum and the high end of the spectrum as they're like, wow, that's, you know, an investment piece, or this is our budget. And I think sometimes it takes a couple rounds of showing them work for them to really understand sort of what they're getting at different price points. And I think that that process can be so enlightening for collectors, even private collectors, where it's like there's no budget really per se. Like they have a comfortability level, but it's not like a corporation where it's a chunk of funds. It's more like a passion project. I think even for them, it's still like we might arrive to a number in our first conversation or a range or a comfortability per piece, but it's really not until they start looking at work and understanding how media, scale, career, how all these things sort of merge together to create a price point that they start realizing, oh, maybe I'm comfortable actually expanding the budget a little bit. Or maybe I actually don't think I want to be that serious in my collecting, and this is feeling out of my comfort zone and I want to back off a little bit. Like I think there's always a level of education and then sort of the client shifting whatever it is to then go forward.
Okay. So yeah, I mean it sounds for the most part it sounds like you've got the fun part of the job because you're not responsible for the artist. You're kind of like you're I mean you're involved in sales, which I think is a lot of energy, but you're also like because you're selling it sometimes saying, "Hey, I think this is a good idea," but you're also facilitating a lot of the buying, which I think is the biggest joy of, you
Yes.
know, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I feel super lucky like to be able to, well, to be on the buying side is very fun. And, you know, we're not buying for ourselves, but it's still, I think, helping people develop that muscle of looking at a piece. Like you and I look at art and photography all the time. So we probably have, I'm assuming you have that innate feeling of like you walk into an art fair or a gallery and you see a piece and you're like, that's mine. And you don't know if you can buy it that day, but you're like, if I could, I would, or I have to buy it today. And I think that's something that we've developed maybe without realizing it because we're so immersed in it. I think helping clients figure out how to develop that muscle is really the fun part. And seeing the light bulb go off and learning what really resonates with them, because you might sit down with a client at the beginning of a project and you know we'll sort of play like the adjective game and thematic game and throw things out and you know what resonates, what doesn't resonate, and they might say something like we really want abstraction or works that feel very strong and active, and then they might totally end up going the opposite direction. It's I mean it's like the budget thing. It's like you don't really know until you start looking. But yeah, you're right. I mean, being on that end of an art sale, regardless of whether it's living in my home or in my client's home, is very fun for sure and rewarding.
You said the adjective game. What did you mean?
Like, well, you know, I think it's really important to sit down with a client, and I actually have developed a questionnaire that I'll sometimes send to them. And just what words resonate with you. If it's a home, it's, you know, what words out of this list feel like they evoke the feelings that you want when you're at home, that you might want reflected in your collection. Is it meditative? Is it ethereal? Is it activating? Is it strong, soft, romantic? Like I think people have a difficult time unless they're really seasoned collectors, really articulating what they're interested in. And our job is to go out in the market and cast a really wide net for them and then bring them back like a distilled menu of, hey, based on your parameters, this is what we think you would like. but we can't do that unless we have some directive. So I think this like adjective game, and that's not what I call it to clients, but the adjective game, I think it helps us to start the communication channel and start brainstorming and also get their wheels turning and thinking, what is it that I want? And then when we're showing them work, like I try to be not overly wordy to the point where it's nauseating, but I want to give them the adjectives as well so that then they can look at a piece and say, oh, that's what she meant by meditative. I hate that, or I love that. And this is why. And, I also think it's like, I think sometimes clients will be, not all clients, but some of them will be a little bit afraid to give you negative feedback and say, I don't like that piece. And I always encourage them, like, as long as you're telling me why you don't like it, that's constructive too, because art's so subjective and, it takes understanding what you don't like to figure out what you do like.
What you like.
Right.
I love the idea that like you're kind of also, you're like you're a consultant, but also like a personal trainer for how to be a good critic, to like define, what, because like it's so true. Like I have that language. I've been in, critiques my entire creative life.
Right.
And I've built up this language, but if I put a photograph in front of somebody that doesn't know how to talk about it, all they can say is I like it or I don't, and they don't have the language just because it hasn't been taught to them, and it's a skill. You can learn it. And so I think that having that menu, that questionnaire that you're talking about, is so smart. Like that's just a great way to
Yeah.
kind of engage and get that, starting to think like, do you like meditative? Are you looking for action? Are you looking for performative? Or like, do you need calming, or do you need, you know dynamic motion, or like what's the
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like another facet, I think, of being an art consultant that a lot of people don't really realize unless you start doing it and then like understand how much a part of the process this is really like education. Like we're really facilitators of information to our clients. So but it's like, yeah, you're right. Like you, for example, it's like you look at art all the time, the ins and outs of photography and your media. So it's like it would totally come naturally to you to explain to someone what kind of photography you like or what kind of paintings you like. But that's not an innate ability in everyone. And I think it's interesting. I think we're also working with like art committees for corporations, and they're just people who are representing the company and they can totally speak to the ethos of the company and the vibe of what they're going for. And then we're sort of taking that end goal and trying to figure out what along the way is going to be interesting to them in terms of art collecting that's also going to have longevity in their space and um, just meet all of their criteria. So yeah, like playing the adjective game constantly, whether it's within a format of a questionnaire or just us going back and forth and talking about a piece, is super important.
very cool. Oop. Um, my phone got excited too. Um, I've met a few like in-house corporate
Mhm.
curators along the way. Would they come to you for projects, or is like your job kind of like what their job is, but they're in-house?
Yeah, so they're an in-house version of us. So we function more like an agency and they're functioning more just internally for that company.
Yeah.
Those jobs are very cool. I mean, fascinating, fascinating.
I have been trying to find a list.
Yeah. It's very yeah, it's kind of an obscured area, I think, of the industry where you it's not out there on the internet who's doing that for all these companies, but it's really quite fascinating. And some companies will have in-house specialists who function as advisors to like wealth manager, like portfolio managers for like family offices. So
Okay.
that's more of like an in-house specialist. That's kind of like how I was saying we can function like a concierge for our clients at the same time as, purchasing the art. They're doing that in-house for the wealth manager's portfolio of people. And then you also have the in-house curators who are just their job is to manage and acquire and de-access that one company's collection. So it's fascinating. And it's totally a realm of work that I feel like a lot of people, I mean, for every 10 people that I say, this is what I do, 9 of them say, I did not know that that existed, which is kind of fun.
You must be like on everybody's VIP list. You must like get all the invites for the art fairs, the galleries. Like, I mean, everybody must want to be your friend, right? I mean,
I mean, I was thinking last week, like my inbox is kind of like speed dating artists sometimes and artworks. It's like yeah, I mean, people, it's very lucky in that way and it's very fun. Like we get invited to a lot of art fairs and openings and previews and studio visits. And that's something that I actively do not take for granted because it's like also I can get so caught up in the day to day and the logistics. And when I have my project manager cap on, I forget to be like, okay, let's not complain. Let's not get bogged down in my email. Like you get to go, you know, go see all this art in person. And I think it's important to also have that back and forth of like the actual art viewing and setting aside time to go do studio visits, have conversations with artists. Otherwise, it's like you lean more toward a weird point and shoot approach of curating collections where you're like, whoa, I need to take a step back and sort of remind myself like what the core of what we're doing is. But yeah, I mean it's definitely amazing to be able to have a lot of access to art and very fun.
what are some of your favorite art fairs?
So I was telling you earlier, I went to IFPDA, the print fair in New York this past week, and that's a fair that I really love. It's a fun fair to go to with clients because I think there's something that feels a little bit less daunting about purchasing prints. And I think that that just creates a little bit more of a light environment. I love the IFPDA. I'm going to Dallas Art Fair in a couple of weeks. It's an amazing small, I mean, relatively small fair in Dallas. And I think it's just so beautifully curated, but also they keep it very diverse. And they're always, I feel like, making efforts to show new work and bring in new galleries. So that's a fair that I really enjoy. And I love, I mean, we go to Miami every year and I love Nada. Nada is always my favorite because it's just quirky, experimental, total like low pressure energy in the air, not quite as, I don't know, overstimulating. And you get to discover new work, which is the whole reason we go to the fairs. So I would say those are my favorites, but there are so many, it's like kind of impossible to choose.
Yeah, you would literally be on the road as a full-time job if you tried to get to every single
Yeah.
art fair.
Right. Like I wish I could go to all of them because it is massively beneficial for us to go to the fairs because you consume so much in one sitting and you're exposed to so much. But it's like, yeah, I mean, you need all the time in the world because there really isn't even a fair season anymore. I feel like we have more of like an off season that's like, I don't know, 1 month or 2 months of the year that there are no fairs.
Yeah, when is that? October?
Well, I feel like the fairs pick up in the spring, mainly in the spring and in the fall. So, but there's just so many of them. I feel like even you have to constantly be on the road if you're going to hit all of them, or
Yeah,
not even the road, really an airplane. But
because it's
yeah,
all over. Yeah.
exactly.
Are you gonna go out to the Hamptons Fair?
I don't have plans to as of now, but I would love to. That's actually a fair that I've never been to, but I've heard amazing things. Have you been?
I have not. I did see the images, unfortunately, I think it was a couple years ago where like one of the major rainstorms came through and the water
Oh,
was like coming into
no,
the booth. It was yeah, it was
that's
very
tragic.
cringe, scary for everybody who was there. But no, and this year I'm gonna be in Austria and
Oh, nice.
France. So we're gonna miss it this year, but hopefully next
Yeah.
2026.
Yeah, that fair is definitely on my list, like my hit list. I mean, who doesn't want to go out to the Hamptons and have it
Yeah.
be considered work? That
Yeah.
sounds me.
And I know it's a deduction, like it's a work trip. Gotta be
Yeah,
there. Sorry.
totally, totally.
So, Yeah, so how else do you find artists that you work with? I guess, you find people through the galleries, you find the art fairs. Like, where else are you? Like, is Instagram dead? Are you still, like, are you on
No,
social for
I
that
feel
or?
like it's so funny. I feel like there was a period of time where, for whatever reason, I felt very resistant to finding art on Instagram. Like it felt like I was cheating, or like there was something about it that I don't know, felt unprofessional and also overstimulating. And I really find a lot of work on Instagram. And I think it's a great way to find artists that are a little bit more untapped, that don't have the representation of a gallery and might otherwise fly under the radar for that reason. So I mean, I love a good Instagram scroll and just see what comes up. Definitely art fairs, definitely just my email inbox is totally expansive. And really just trying to be out and about as much as I can, going to openings and going to gallery shows and trying to make an effort to not only go to see the show, but also connect with the gallery and see like what's been sitting in their storage, like what's in their flat files, and really digging through everything and taking advantage of the massive inventories that these galleries have. Like I feel like a lot of people don't realize how much inventory galleries are hanging on to. And sometimes it's like you walk in to see one show, you ask one question that leads to a conversation, and they're like, oh, we have this one artist we should show you in the back room. Then that ends up being your favorite artist and the work that you sell when you came in for one piece. Like, I think those organic sort of rabbit holes that you go down, whether it's, like on your phone or on your email or in person, usually that's how you find some really exciting, fresh work. And of course, the art fairs. But the art fairs can tend to also be, you get so caught up socializing and they're jam packed and you're trying to see everything. So there's kind of this like weird mentality of making it through the fair instead of slowing down and like really absorbing everything. So I wouldn't say I walk away from the fairs with as much, like new information as I would like to, rather than going to the gallery and taking the time to have the long conversations and like see all the work that they have. But yeah, I mean, there are just so many channels now for art viewing. It's insane.
Yeah. It's, when you're just talking about those three kind of different ways to experience the work. And it's like, yeah, the art fair is like the art mall where you're
Yeah.
seeing, 20 or 30 brands at once, or 50, whatever,
Yeah.
plus the artists that they're representing internally. So then it's, 300. And then at the gallery, they might have the solo show plus, 10, 15, 20 artists that they represent. And so that's like a little bit more in depth if it's not at the opening and you've got time to like sit down and talk. And then there's the studio visit where you're like really focused on like the one, brand identity, and you're really getting into depth on that one individual artist. But similar to the art fairs, like if you just spent, your entire professional life doing studio visits, which would also be amazing, but
Yeah, I
you
wouldn't
know
have any clients.
but,
Right. Like that's totally, I mean, it's funny. We talk about that all the time. We're like, gosh, like when we're really busy, just in the weeds with projects, we're like, gosh, we've got to get out to artist studios. And it's like time goes by so fast. Then we're like, oh my gosh, like I've got to close my computer, like nothing is dire, and go out and be in the world and see the art. But yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Like I think I learn the most interesting tidbits about an artist's body of work from having a conversation with the artist. And that's when I can turn around to a client and have like that one little nugget of information that then flips the switch for them, where they're suddenly fascinated with the work. And it's like, I think that the whole Instagram art accessibility online, like it's amazing for the industry in terms of accessibility and exploration. And I'm sure it's amazing for artists because now you don't 100, you don't need gallery representation. You can still have your work out there somewhere. But I think the other end of that is it it makes you not realize when you're slipping into this mode of just looking and saying, I like it, I don't like it. And then looking and saying, and that's totally not the way to look at art. Like you have to look at it, read about it, walk away from it, come back to it. And you might come back to it and like it less or more, but it's like, I think people have been robbed a little bit of the real art collecting experience when they're totally functioning online and not having those interactions, whether it's like with someone at an art fair or a dealer or an artist. But it's also hard because it's really easy to be in your slippers and your pajamas, doing a good scroll, and then yeah, and then you find something and that can totally be the winner. But um it is interesting just how many channels there are these days, and like how our attention spans, I mean, collectively, I think have shortened a lot, which is awful. And that's actually why I love, I mean, to totally tie the knot, that's why I love film photography, because it's like the one hobby that I have that forces me to be very patient and very intentional, and not only with capturing the image, but waiting for the image to come back and seeing if you like it. It's like everything is so immediate nowadays with like Amazon and Instagram. So that's why I always come back to my appreciation for film photography.
It is true, right? The immediacy of our reality between like the food delivery and the stores, like you said, it's like, when we get off, we're probably gonna have 6 ads for like
Yeah.
frames in our Instagram feed because we
Right.
all talked about it. Um, and it's been there was a story in the New York Times talking about how photography is actually having a little bit of a resurgence because they want AI is causing like people to question, the authentic aspect, and that's why like photographs, like traditional print, um, is kind of getting people's attention again.
Wow.
Have you noticed that? Have you noticed any trends with what people are asking?
Absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, I haven't read that article and I need you to send it to me because that sounds
I will.
great. But absolutely, I think we notice a lot of trends with what our clients are interested in. And I feel like just on the subject of photography, there was a big shift to abstraction. And I do feel like there's been a big shift back lately to just realism. And a lot of that does come through in photography. I also feel like, you know, trends are all cyclical and it's a pendulum. And I feel like with iPhones and digital photography and Photoshop, and now it's like AI, it's kind of exploded out of control. And I feel like now people are starting to look back at a photograph that's just a really gorgeous capturing of a moment or a landscape, maybe with a tweak or something interesting about the perspective or the technique, but that is starting to, like, now that, I don't know, the digitization of everything has become so vast. I feel like people have found a lot of nostalgia and appreciation for the simplicity of photography, which is really lovely. And I think that's amazing. And the craft for it, because I think, I don't know, I always tell my clients, it's like you can look at a photograph and say like, yeah, that's just a photograph of X, but then it's like for that image to stand out among someone just being trigger happy on their iPhone and taking a million images of something very similar, like to have the ability to shoot something and have one image that just for whatever reason like rises above the others in terms of how interesting it is and thought provoking and whatever it is that makes people glob onto it and want to have it hanging in their house. Like, I think that's actually become like more drastic of something that's noticeable now that it's just total oversaturation of photography. I'm curious what you think of that being a photographer too.
I mean, I'm glad to hear it. Like I feel, like my sales have been down, not up, but it's kind of, the turbulence in the market and
Yeah.
still a little bit of post-COVID, it's like it hasn't kicked back up to where I would like to see the sales going. So, but I am, I'm hearing it from you. I'm seeing it, like I said, the story in the New York Times and everything, that it's like there is a little glimmer of hope in the future that, I'm essentially a traditional landscape photographer. So like what you were saying, it's like I don't retouch my images almost to a point.
Mhm.
Um, so I hope, and I like hearing what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's totally true. And it's kind of exciting. Like, I feel like, especially with the whole AI conversation in the mix, I mean, personally, I think people are just going to burn out on the whole AI thing in terms of it being like a channel for creative output. Obviously, that's a way larger conversation, but I feel like there is something now that's really amazing about just authenticity and just pure beauty that you get in photography. Photography that's not being spit out of an algorithm, that was
Right.
actually shot by a human.
And human element. You had mentioned the auction houses a little bit. Um, when would a client come to you saying, I'm really looking to get, a Paul Strand print? Can you just keep an eye out for what's coming up? Like what are some scenarios where auction houses get involved for you?
So we do, I mean, totally varied. We will definitely have that occur where a client is interested in something very specific that might be more rare or far and few between in the market. And then we're keeping an eye on the auction houses to see if it might come up there, or tapping into our resources and saying, hey, our client's looking for X. Can you let us know if one comes across your desk? More often than that, we are selling through auction houses, which can be a great method for divesting a collection, depending on the collection itself and what the client wants that to look like.
Okay. So you'll go to the auction house and say we have a client that's looking, yeah, to release some of the collection
Yeah.
back onto the market.
Yeah,
Um, okay.
exactly.
What would a dream project be for you?
Um, no budget, first of all. Of course, no budget would be great. No, I mean, regardless of budget, I think, like, reflecting back on projects that we've had recently that I would classify in one way or another as being a dream project, I think the common denominator is our clients who are have a very clear vision of what they're looking for and are very interested in finding what that is, but are also very open-minded and collaborative and willing to be a little bit bold and experimental and learn, and clients who are collaborative. I think, looking back on all of our projects, I mean, one of the coolest projects I've been able to work on was for an engineering school, developing a collection for them that was sort of a way to bridge the gap between their students studying engineering and how they might be able to think a little bit more expansively into art. So sort of finding artists that might strike a chord with engineers, which I mean, I learned a lot about engineering during that project. It was quite fascinating, and got to meet a lot of artists who are doing amazing work that is, I mean, some of them way over my head until I really sat down and did a deep dive on what they're doing. Um, but any client who is open-minded and collaborative is always an exciting project, regardless of budget or scope. It's like, if they are willing to really be students to the process and also excited about collecting and have a passion for it, or want to develop a passion for it on behalf of the company they're representing, or we work with real estate developers a lot. They're a lot of the time dream clients because they really care about creating something really special and monumental for their, massive skyscrapers. But yeah, I mean, any client who is enthusiastic and collaborative and willing to come to the table and, give really good feedback and learn are always the dream clients.
Nice. Um, I think we got through everything I wanted to talk about. Was there anything else you wanted to share?
Um,
Um,
Not that comes to mind. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm curious, like, where you are with your body of work and what you've been working on and what's been inspiring to you lately.
um, well, I've got this ongoing project on the American freight
Mhm.
train system. And so that's been going on for almost 6 years. Next solo show is end of April in Hudson, New York. I'll send you the details. Um, I went to the um, other print fair that was happening in Brooklyn at Powerhouse on Sunday, and that was fantastic. That was all, lithography printing, not photo based.
Mhm.
Um, I am, I'm curious about the political activism
Absolutely.
that is coming and happening. Um, we walked, there was an artist talk that was happening at the old Stonehouse in Brooklyn, right by Powerhouse, that my wife's colleagues were involved in. And one of the artists was out, and then she was like painting signs with hearts with messages on it for the protest that's coming up like this weekend, I think this upcoming weekend. And I was kind of I wish I had known she was doing it or been aware of it, because I would have liked to have like filmed that just
Yeah.
from a documentary standpoint, not necessarily for an art piece, but just to like film the process of creating this work to help get the message out. Um, so that caught my attention.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite photos I've ever, I mean, no one sees my photos outside of myself because they're not, I mean, they're not for selling or distributing or exhibiting, but some of my favorite photos I've ever taken were at the Women's March from Washington Square Park after the Roe v. Wade, overturn. It was, I mean, I hope to, it's just, it's amazing to be able to capture those moments 100% and just
Yeah.
have them like live on. So when you go to art fairs, do you feel like it inspires your work and makes you think about what you're working on, or are you able to compartmentalize and like be an art appreciator outside of your production and creative flow?
Thank you for that. It's most of it's networking. Because I'll go in and I'm looking for, additional dealers to work with. Going to see the curators that I know that are like at the fair to say hello. And I'll go because I'm recruiting talent, for this show and just for future, potential collaborations. Um, it doesn't impact my like creative vision too much. Um, I think that, early on, I was going to the galleries just to take a look about how everyone was presenting their work. And that was just like when I, saw that like 95% of the galleries were white shadow box frame,
Mhm.
um, photographs are mounted, mats are dead. Um, top mounting uh was the standard. Phase mounting was pretty much already gone. And so I mean that was like on the early side. And yeah, so now it's appreciation, um seeing who I know is on the wall,
Mhm.
um some of the friends, some of the
That's
colleagues,
so
some of the people I
exciting.
admire.
Yeah. I'm always curious just because I can imagine just because the art fairs can be so, I mean, overstimulating at times. I can imagine if you're also focused, like in the midst of a body of work or focused on something new or trying to conceptualize something new. I'm always curious for artists if it feels like it's like walking into an art fair is so noisy for them, or if they're able to kind of put their work aside, glean inspiration in small ways, and I don't know, walk away and not feel totally like overwhelmed or I
It's
don't
yeah, I think you've got to like have a certain amount of ability to filter out all of that because it is incredibly stimulating, right? And you need to be coming up with your own ideas internally. You don't want to just go in and like, oh yeah, I can take a photograph of the dog too,
know.
because the gallery's already got it on the wall against white, and like, and at the same time, don't get frustrated about your photographs of your dogs because every dog has been photographed in the world, and it's a little bit of yeah, but what are you bringing to that portrait or it's like, why are you shooting and who are you shooting and when, and it's like, I think, for the most part, it can be a stimulus. It's like going to a library, it's just like, it's
Totally.
a lot of information in there. And, you definitely have to like step back and sometimes, just stay on target and not get, you know, discouraged or
Mm.
sucked in by a trend or, what you think is a trend.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine that can be, I don't know, throw you off your balance or make you question. I don't know. I mean, this is why I'm not an artist, is because I couldn't even get through like crit day in undergrad. Like it was like everyone has so many amazing ideas, you know? It's kind of a crazy world to live in where you're producing and you're also immersed in other people producing. So
I mean,
it's
it hurts sometimes, it's like when you see, a couple of, there's the whole spectrum, right, of the emotion of just like excitement for somebody's success, a touch of jealousy, and a huge piece of admiration. Um, somewhere between, why didn't I think of that? And oh my God, they are absolutely brilliant. And I never would have thought about it anyways. So just, the fact that you're picking up a blowtorch and, cutting up a steel tank and, cutting, you know, uh, lace lingerie out of it and putting it on the wall. Power to you.
creative. Yeah.
Yes.
Power
I don't
to
know
you.
if you know her work or not, but
No, I don't. But
I'll
now I'm
send
gonna
it.
look it up. Great.
Well, Kimberly, thank you so much. This has been really, really insightful and enjoying. I hope it was rewarding for you as well. And thank
Oh
you for
yeah.
your questions.
Yeah. Thank you. I had a great time and appreciate your questions and love B&H. Big fan. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, B&H, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.